And it is on this day, January 30th, 2024, that I finished Words of Radiance Part 1 and Words of Radiance Part 2! Yes! Oh, this book was absolutely fantastic, and I feel absolutely terrible for stopping in the first part. This has happened twice now. It happened with Way of Kings, it's happened with Words of Radiance, where I stop right before the part that will give me the push I need. So, sometimes I just need to bite through it, apparently. But, I picked it up again on Saturday, and I read through the rest of part 1. Let me put my bookmark in here so you understand. This, about right here, this is where I stopped during the fall of last year. Last Friday/Saturday, Friday night, Saturday, I read all of this. Boop. Read all of that, so part 1 was done. And then literally 11 p.m. on Sunday night, I started this, and I finished this at 1 a.m. last night. All of part 2. Pretty much in 25 hours. Pretty much. With classes in the middle of that, too. I can't tell you how it happened. I just ate this. Like, the whole thing was just gone. It was food. It was fantastic. I was making the list of things to talk about before this video, and it's so insanely long. I don't even know how long this video is gonna be. I'm gonna try to not make it like a decade long, but there's so much to talk about. So we're just gonna jump into non-spoilers, and I'm gonna be drinking a lot of water because I'm gonna be doing a lot of talking. There's so much to talk about. So to get started, I want to talk a little bit about Brandon Sanderson, the author. I have read several books by this author by now. I have read, in fact, 9. Checking. I've now read 9 books by Brandon Sanderson, including this one. And I have to say, I'm at a point now, which he has talked about before, that I trust him an insane amount as an author. Even though I kind of like his cadence or whatnot, he has me on my toes. And what I mean by that is because I know what Sanderson has done in the past in other books, I have full faith that he will kill off a character. I have full faith that he will make all the plot just disappear and just fuck everything up and make humanity look like it's about to fail. I have full faith in him doing all that. And what that means is me, when I'm reading, I am anticipating things to go wrong, but he still has the talent to surprise me every time. And adding on to that, it adds anticipation because I am waiting for stuff to go bad, and I see things start to go that way, and I'm like, it's gonna go like this, it's gonna go like this. I instantly assume the worst, and it really adds to the experience of reading this book a lot. And I can see why people say to read Mistborn first, and then, read the standalones if you have the time, and get to this, because I can see how it can add to the experience, for sure. And I feel that. And I fully trust Sanderson as an author to give me a fantastic book. Pretty much, period, at this point. So I'm really glad I did the Kickstarter. The whole idea of the Kickstarter, when it happened, was you get 4 books that you know nothing about unless you looked. But the idea was you get 4 books that you know nothing about, and you just trust that Sanderson wrote good books, and you read them without knowing nothing about them. And I feel that way with his books now, where I feel like I could pick it up, and it'll take me a bit to get into it, but once I do, it just fucking slaps. It's so good. The way he storytells is just so good. It's just so good. So yeah, this is definitely. We'll argue about this on the reread, but for now, this is definitely the best book I've ever read. Probably, I can probably say that flat out. And it's different than a lot of books I've read, so there's some nuance there. But in just in terms of the story and the storytelling and everything, this is the best book I've read. It's it's just packed. It's just packed with everything I love. Literally from wherever I stopped in the fall, which I don't remember much of that first section because it's been several months, but every single scene since then has has been fantastic. I think there's maybe like two scenes where it's like, this is a little mid. Two scenes. It's insane. So, again, just I don't want to like preach the author per se, but I just want to say that I have respect for this kind of storytelling immensely. And it really has me thinking when I'm reading. I'm like conscious of it as I'm reading. And it somehow adds to it. It should be something that, makes it more like predictable, but no, Sanderson's entirely unpredictable, and that's what kind of makes it fantastic. So, I just want to edit that blurb. Now we'll get full on into the very specific things. First, we'll talk about world building. It's Stormlight Archive. The world building's fantastic. There's like period. Everything about it, like all the he has so many small, subtle, quiet details. He has things about science. He sneaks some science in here or there. He sneaks in stuff about like not biology. Plants. What's studying plants? Botanist. He adds in botany. He adds all kinds of aspects of society, from the very high places to the very low places to the middle of nowhere places that no one has seen. He has so much just interesting small commentary everywhere. All the creatures he's made up, all the storms he's made up, the different lands and environments he's made up, the different societies. He gives all kinds of little snippets and pieces into the societies, particularly in the interludes, but in other places too, especially with the character Shalon. Shalon goes around and studies things. And so there's just so much world building. And this book in particular, it was not overwhelming at all. It was a fantastic amount to me. There was a lot of like, it all felt like there was a reason it was said. Even if it wasn't like a particularly important reason, it felt natural. It fit. It felt natural to the character who was exploring and doing things, but also felt natural to contributing to the environment of the story. So the world building in this book was fantastic. I think when I read Way of Kings that I said that some of the world building seemed excessive. Not anymore. I think it makes it this foreign world story that it is. And again, this is like fantasy to me at this point. This is like proper fantastic fantasy. What I said to my friends this morning was that like this is the series that I would most want to own in leatherback. I can't afford it even though he did it. But this is the series I'd most want to own in leatherback because it feels right as a leatherback cover. It feels like that's how it should be, because it's just that it has that kind of weight to the story. I don't know how else to explain it other than that. But world building on peak. Magic. Well, again, it's Brandon Sanderson. He's gonna have crazy magic, but the magic is so good, and the way it reveals and the way it comes out feels very natural. And again, I have such respect for that, where the characters most of the time accidentally find their magic, and the way that he can just make the accident seem realistic, and then how they figure it out is fantastic to me. And then how they experiment with it and figure out what they can do, and like how they explore it, and how he explains to the reader what it can do, but also shows how much the characters don't know about it too. It has that balance of something, you don't know something, and you can have anticipation because of it, but also you can have dramatic irony because of it, because you know what can happen as well. And so, so good. And again, you don't really know the extent things can go until it happens as well. And so you're just learning it as you go, and you gather the pieces, and then you start to see, Sanderson's really good at giving you just enough pieces to assume the wrong thing. He's really good at that. So he did that a few times with the magic system in this book. Which is also fantastic. The characters are fantastic. I love all the main characters. Well, depends who you consider a main character. You know, Sadius. I haven't listened to the audiobook, so I don't know how you say the names. But that man, he's not a favorite character, obviously. But in terms of all the main people, Dalinar, Kaladin, Shallan, Seth, I include Seth on that list. Wit. Oh, I love Wit. I love Wit so much. I can't tell you how much I love that man. Yasna, like, all the characters are just fantastic. I love them. Adolin, don't forget Adolin. I love all of them dearly. Very dearly. I don't want to, like, call myself out, but I started playing Sims again just so I can make these characters in Sims. That's how bad. That's how far it's gone, okay? I love these characters very much. And I'm very glad to have pins of Kaladin and Shallan. I'll get them done real quick. This is going to be a long video anyway. We might as well be all fancy. Here's my pin of Shallan. Please, focus. Shallan. And then a pin of Kaladin. Which is sick. Sick! So, I'm really glad I got these. I got these before I knew who these people were. And now I do. And I love this. So good. Okay. Anyway, I adore the characters in my heart. I feel very deeply attached to them. Not a spoiler, because I'm not saying who it is or whatnot, but, like, if any character was going to die or possibly could die, I was on my seat. I wasn't, like... I wouldn't have cried for them, per se, but I would be upset. I would be sad. I would be mourning internally for their loss if the characters possibly died. No spoilers, but that is definitely, like, I have an attachment for all these people, flat out. Even if they're sometimes being stupid and dumb. It's kind of like Vin in Mistborn. When I first read Mistborn, sometimes I thought she was being an absolute idiot. Not to be shady, but at the time I was Vin's age, and so I felt I was in the position to be upset at her. But, like, sometimes she wasn't doing the smartest things, which is a very human thing to do. But I still loved and adored her. I still wanted to, like, I wanted her to succeed, but also not get too hurt. The reader always wants the characters to get hurt because it's more interesting, but, like, you also don't. It's that weird balance. That weird balance is fantastic in this book, where it's like you want the characters to get hurt, but you don't. Oh, I just remembered another fantastic scene. Oh my god. The list of spoiler scenes is really long right now. Oh, I should plug my computer in. Hold on. That was a little ill-prepared on my part. The list of spoiler scenes is really long, and again, like, there's that balance of I want them to get hurt, and, like, the feelings you get when they do get hurt or are, like, in a bad situation. You're, like, hyped, you're on your toes or whatnot, but also you still want to protect them and love them. It's a very contradicting balance as a reader, and I definitely was working through that throughout this novel. Oh, man. I dropped the book. Oh, no. I'm sorry, Words of Radiance. Part 2, specifically. We said that. Oh, we'll get to that last. Mystery. There's a lot of mystery to these books, and that's just how Sanderson tells his magic and his, I guess it's part of the world building too, but also part of the plot. He likes to have mystery leading you along, and he likes having humanity, the main group, whether or not they are humans. I'm going to use the word humanity as, like, a analogy. But humanity doesn't know things. Humanity likely will never fully understand things. Like, that's just how the world is. And he incorporates that into his books. I think I saw a quote when he was talking about magic systems, because he was a professor and taught a lot of this for a while and wrote essays on this. But I believe he has a quote where he says that he doesn't believe humans will fully understand science. He likes to treat his magic the same way. They won't always fully understand the magic. They'll think they know enough and think they're know-it-alls in it until they're not. And yeah, that mystery definitely pulls you along. You don't know what can possibly happen. Also, backstories. There's a lot of flashbacks throughout this book. The first book had flashbacks too. I'm sure the third book will have flashbacks. The flashbacks in this book I thought were fantastic. Some of them I was like, I don't quite know where this is going, but once you get the flashbacks going, once you realize what is going on with the flashbacks, even just a little bit, it really adds to the next flashback that comes. And he did twice do that thing where he put a flashback exactly where you don't want a flashback, and you're like, no, I want to know what happens, kind of thing. So he knew what he was doing. He put that order there on purpose, and sometimes it's a little annoying, and then you read the flashback and you're like, oh, this is actually a good spot for that. And again, just more of that dichotomy as you're going. So good. So the very last thing is a quote that I said to my roommate while I was reading this book yesterday. I feel so bad for them dealing with me binge reading this. A quote I said to my roommate to describe what it's like reading some of these scenes and why I am like vocally reacting when I'm reading this book in particular. I don't usually do that. I described it to them as watching trains collide, but in a different way. So, dramatic irony is one of my favorite effects you can use in books, and it's very powerful in fantasy. That's why it's used so much in fantasy and mystery. That's probably why I like those a lot. But dramatic irony is just when you know something that the characters don't, or a character knows something, you know something that a character knows, but the other character doesn't. And you keep watching those near misses, where it's like, oh, it's going to come up and it doesn't come up. Or, oh no, they don't realize it until it happens. Or they don't realize it and then they don't see it happen. Like, there's all those combinations you can do of that lack of knowledge in one spot and knowledge in another. And Sanderson, how he does it in this book, is it's like you're anticipating two trains to collide. You see them heading directly towards each other on the exact same track. And then somehow they just cut off the track. Like, you see the track, you see they're going towards each other, you're like, surely they won't go off the track somehow. And then they just go off the track. And then you see it happen again. It's like a new track is created. And then you see them heading towards each other, and you're like, surely this time. And then they go right past. And he just does that over and over and over and over again in this book. And I was just like, at some points. Because I was just like, y'all are so close to figuring out things. And the timing would be just off. The timing would be just enough off for you to be like, no! I really thought that would happen. And like, you'd be, even if you didn't think it would happen, you'd be so hopeful that it would, that it causes the exact same effect. And it is seriously one of my favorite devices in novels. And that's one of the consistent things I can say through most of the series I've read. I kind of want to do an analysis of how many books I've read with that. But it is definitely one of my favorite things. It's part of why I loved Codex Alera so much. Codex Alera did it in a very similar capacity to this one. So I just love that. I love that balance of knowledge. Even if it frustrates me when I'm reading the book. When I finish the book, I'm just like, oh, that was so good. So, again, the trains about to collide and then barely missing got me quite a bit. So, sorry, roommate, but that was a good analogy I used in the moment. Okay, with all that said, I'm going to get into spoilers just because there's so much on this list to talk about. So much happened in this book. That's the last thing for non-spoilers. This book is so long, I seriously started to think I was reading another book. Like, I thought some of this happened in Way of Kings. I had to go back to the beginning to remember what happened at the start of this book. I feel like I've been on a journey. And again, I read all of this in one book in one day. So like it was all like smashed together, and it still feels like again living another lifetime. So peak, so good, so good. So now we get into spoilers. I'm gonna sip some water, and then we'll dive in. By the way, these are not in order. I don't know what we're gonna talk about first. I think we'll jump around. My nose is burning. I think we'll jump around as we go, but start with Yasna. We'll start with Yasna part 1 and then do Yasna part 2 since it's on my head because I read the epilogue right before recording this video. I finished the rest of the book by 1 a.m., but I saved the epilogue for right before this video to hype me up, and it hyped me up, so we're going to talk about the epilogue very shortly. But first, let's talk about Yasna at the start of the book. Start of the book, you think she's a very important character. You think that she's going to continue onward. I believe at the end of my last video for Way of Kings, I said Yasna's going to be at the Shattered Plains. She was not at the Shattered Plains. She got stabbed, and the ship sunk, and Shallan thought that Yasna was dead. And so Shallan went on this like massive journey to become a new Yasna Colon, but in a Shallan version, whatever. But Shallan became an absolutely fantastic character because of all her character development with Yasna dying and figuring out her place in the world, and also activating her powers and figuring out, like, addressing her past and becoming a new person based off of that. First of all, before we get back to Yasna, Shallan's whole storyline is fucking fantastic. I love it so much. And that's a huge part of this book, is Shallan's storyline. Fantastic. So, we'll probably come back to that, but I just want to add that in here. But specifically, Yasna dies. And her death very early in the book made me go, what the fuck, we already lost someone. We're at the start of Words of Radiance. I didn't know who else we were going to lose or what was going to happen. I knew Seth was going after Dalinar from Way of Kings, so I was like, okay, this is not good. Will the whole Colon family probably die? That's scary. So it was so early on in the book that that happened. I was like, I don't even know what to expect. I don't know how that impacts anything. And so that added to the anticipation of Shallan's storyline along the way, because you knew that she was still coping with that. And you're wondering, like, how will all these effects play out? How will the ripples in the tide balance out, if they do? And then I read the epilogue where Wit might be my favorite character. It's complicated. I love Wit. Wit has a point of view. He's doing his good old Wit things, where he's talking to a crab, just a random ass crab, and then fucking Yasna Colon appears. She's alive and fine. She's like, I need to do these things, and Wit is like, yeah, it's already happened. Oh, that's already happened too. Yeah, the world has moved on without you. Like, just... I was not expecting that. I thought Yasna was dead, for sure. I'm very curious. I guess Shallan forgot or didn't know. I think Shallan... Ooh. Yeah. This is something to check when I do the reread, but I think Shallan didn't know that people with Stormlight could heal at this point, and so I wonder if that's what happened. If Yasna got stabbed, fell, the whole ship started sinking or whatever, it was on fire, all the things happened. She went to Shadow Realm and healed. That's a possibility. Or she just did an illusion, or who knows what she did. She could have done so many things because we didn't understand how magic worked at that point in the book. So 100% believe she was gone. She's back. Probably an Oathbringer. With Wit. I hope Wit is a main point of view in Oathbringer. I really do. I love that man. I think that's what we'll talk about next. We'll just talk about Wit, because I'm, like, fanboying over it right now. Wit. My man, Wit. He just appears very randomly throughout the series, and I have such respect for that. Usually those kinds of characters can be very annoying, but the way he gives that prophecy vibe. He gives the prophecy vibe, he gives the omniscience vibe, which I'm very sure that he is like many of my other favorite characters, where he has like an intellectus of sorts. He has like this infinite knowledge in some capacity, and he has to disperse that knowledge very delicately. And I love those scenes. It's those scenes where he shows up to that one person that he needs to show up to in that moment. And so throughout the story, we see him in all kinds of capacities visiting all kinds of people. Kaladin, obviously, comes up. I think he gave Kaladin the flute in Way of Kings. I can't remember. That scene was a very long time ago. I wish I could return to it, but I don't know where it is. So if anyone happens to remember, I will go find that scene. But he shows up to Kaladin to give the flute. Later in this book, when Kaladin is in jail, which we'll talk about that soon, Wit shows up, and Wit tells him a story. And at first, it seems like Kaladin doesn't take away the story because he's in jail and he's feeling a lot of emotions at that moment. But later on, in another fantastic moment that we will talk about, the story comes back to him and he realizes just how he feels and just what is going on. And it's fantastic. And then very soon after that, Wit appears to all three of them at once: Shallan, Adolin, and Kaladin. We know how Adolin knows Wit. He was the king's wit for a while. But Shallan, earlier in the book, he was the one who told her about Halaran when she was a kid, and told her that she needed to accept the past, which she refused to accept until the very end of this book. And so he knew, even back then, he knew. And he was waiting for the right time for her to unlock her powers and figure it out, which is what happened throughout the story, and that was a lot of her arc. But Wit was fully aware, and so Wit appears later on, and Shallan's like, "It's you," and gives him a hug. And his reaction when she gives him a hug is also fantastic. But he just plays this role as that one setting the little seeds here and there. And I've always been a big fan of those roles. You ask any of my friends what a lot of my favorite characters are, and pretty consistently, it's those kinds of characters. It doesn't matter if they're a good person or not. I just love those kinds of characters. A good example of that would be Gaius Sextus, I believe, from Codex Alera, or Vateran from the Dresden Files, or, again, insert all these other examples here, where people just have that knowledge and they use that knowledge to manipulate things just barely. Like, not like completely change everything, though that also has some valuableness to it too, but you can see their intention. You anticipate the characters to take the advice, and then sometimes they don't, and that's, again, part of that dramatic irony that infuriates you. But Wit is kind of his own plot device, I guess you could say, and I respect that kind of device. Pretty much what I'm getting at. Oh, God. This list is so long. And a lot of them are tied together, so I'm trying to figure out which one's not tied together to address first. Let's do Eshonai. I don't know how to say any of their names. I should very much Google that. I did recently learn that Mistborn, it is Sazed, not Sazed, which is my bad. So, I need to learn how to pronounce these names, but we're going to say Eshonai, but what does she call her people? Oh, why can't I remember the name of their people? We'll say Parshman. But she's a part of, like, she's in the Shattered Plains and is the one with the Shardblade from Way of Kings who was fighting on the side of the Parshman. And in this book, we are in her point of view in a lot of the interludes and several sections. And we think we see what's going on. We see that she is like trying to like mislead her sister. I don't know if that's like a literal sister. I think it is a literal sister. But there were times where I was like, is she a metaphorical sister? I can't tell. But she was trying to mislead this one person to delay their discovery just a little bit for the possibility of a peace treaty. For the possibility of a peace treaty, and in order to do that, she says that she'll take on this new form because she doesn't want the other person to take on the new form yet. And just as that's happening, on the other side, Dalinar and crew are finally getting together to go meet about a peace treaty. And it's right when she gets that new form, and the new form is like a war form, but like elevated to make her even more angry. You can tell all the new songs in the new form are all tied to war-related things in a extreme level. It is a violence kind of level. So like the song of like interest would be something like anticipation for a hunt kind of thing. It gives that kind of vibe. And you can tell the first 3 songs she talks about, pretty much after she does the transformation, all of them are like anger, impatience. Like there are all these things that are like, these are not good things. And the timing lines up just wrong. And so they meet together, and she's angry and saying, we're going to kill your people. And again, the first half of the book, she's been working for peace, so you think that's what's going to happen. And then that sequence happens, and you're like, oh no, is there any way this can go back, or is it really going to go down? And you discover that it is actually going to go down. The Parchments start to force the rest of them into this new form. And some of them escape, which we haven't seen the escapees yet, by the way. I'm paying attention. We did not see them, which is suspicious. But we did see Shen. So Shen comes around, and he pretty much spied on behalf of both sides to a capacity and told Dalinar what to expect. And so now Shen, I guess, is part of the crew. That's going to be very interesting. The desolation has arrived. Shen's going to be part of the crew in the next book, and we'll see what interplay is there, especially as the desolation starts to go around. But I still don't really know if it is tied to the Parchment. Like, Words of Radiance makes us think it is. I still have a sneaking suspicion that has nothing to do with them. Sneaking suspicion. Not any confidence. Just, I have a feeling that it's more than that that's going on. But, yeah. So, Eshonai, or however you say her name, has a very fascinating arc throughout, and it contributes to that dramatic irony. And it's another one of those perspectives that you wouldn't expect to read if it were a typical fantasy or not fantasy novel. I feel the art of using an enemy, we're going to put enemy in quotes because enemy is very, what's the word? It's not suggestive. I don't know why suggestive is the word coming to my head. It's point of view dependent. The word's not coming to me right now, but it is very point of view dependent. But we'll say enemy as a point of view is very, not necessarily uncommon, but we'll say uncommon in books because it has a particular balance to it. There's revealing too much of what's going on, and there's revealing what happens and then what doesn't happen, the interplay going on there. So that case would be like with Dalinar Sidaeus, where you are in Sidaeus' point of view and you know how he's going to fuck up Dalinar's plan, but Dalinar comes with a new plan that he doesn't tell you about that overcomes Sidaeus' plan, but Sidaeus had another plan on top of that. When you're doing that kind of interplay, that's fantastic. When you do the kind of interplay where you're showing the enemy point of view because you think that means that the enemy is going to win, but then they die at the end, that also can work very well. I've only seen it twice, maybe twice, but that's also not a very common thing. In this book, Sanderson sold me on that idea. He sold me on the idea of putting you in the perspectives of the people that are antagonists in that moment. They're not the evil of the world, which is a very interesting thing about this novel that I also have mad respect for. But they are antagonists to the main ideas, to the oaths, to all these different things going on. And I would include the Ghostbloods in part of that as well. Oh, the Ghostbloods. Ghostblood is the name of the next book in Mistborn. That has me very concerned. It's the name of the next book in Mistborn. Not Stormlight. Kind of suspicious there. I haven't read Lost Metal yet, which is my problem. But anyway, so those were some of the examples of that. Moash is another example of that. So here's my quick aside on Moash. Moash, very interesting at first. The reveal that he was the one trying to assassinate the king was very interesting. I thought he was going to say, no, it wasn't me, and that it was going to drag on. But then he said, it was me, and I was just like, hold on, pause. Double take. And I literally, my roommate saw me react to that. And they were like, what just happened? I was just like, he actually did. So Kaladin and him actually have that conversation, and Kaladin doesn't turn him in. And so then there's that dilemma as a reader where you're like, frick. Which thing's going to happen? What is the balance here? Kaladin's now having all these feelings and all these conflicts happening because Moash is trying to convince him of revenge and these other concepts and doing what is right for the people from his perspective. This guy keeps slamming his door and it's very annoying. But he keeps doing what is right from his... He wants to do what's right from his perspective. And Kaladin thinks that that is what's right. And he is kind of convinced. He's not convinced at first. He's very angry at first, but he also procrastinates turning him in. And I knew from procrastination in real life that that was a bad sign. And it was. So gradually that I guess you could say like mental battle just fights over Kaladin. And when, oh god, there's so many details here. When the duel happens, we'll get to the duel in a bit. It's impossible to do this all in chronological order. After the duel, he gets sent to jail, and because he's stuck in the jail, he has so many torn feelings, and he's thinking about Syl, who has been kind of struggling to support him recently. And Syl, in particular, in the jail, kept telling Kaladin, like, I don't like what you're doing, I don't like how you're thinking, this is a bad path. And it all goes over Kaladin's head. Dalinar comes in and gives Kaladin some reflection on how things are. That is kind of helpful and kind of very not helpful, because he says that Rashon showed up, and again, Rashon is what caused Kaladin's family so many problems. And so then Wit shows up. I think I went out of order here, but it doesn't matter. Wit shows up, and Wit does the song, and the song kind of just goes over Kaladin's head as well. So you see all of these hints going right over his head, and you're like, Kaladin, you are very much missing a very key thing here. And it's very obvious as the reader, because you know it's going to be an oath thing, it's going to be a radiant thing, etc. But Kaladin in the moment is very, very based on his feelings and just the life he has lived, which I would struggle to empathize with, let's be honest. He went through a lot. So he gets out of jail, and he says that he's going to like help participate in this assassination. But then as soon as he gets to the meetings and ideas, he's like, okay, this feels a bit wrong. And he loses Syl's power. The very last moment he has Syl's power is before he falls into the chasms with Shallan. Both of them heal themselves from Stormlight and use up their Stormlight while they're in the chasm. And that's the last time Kaladin has Syl. Technically. But they're going through the chasms together. That whole sequence is fantastic. First of all, it showed a lot about Shallan. We had Shallan's flashback that revealed that she killed her father. I was very much anticipating it to be the flashback where she killed her mother. No. It was the flashback where she killed her father that appeared at just the right moment to tell Kaladin just how much he was assuming things about her. And it's in that moment that you realize just how much the lives of all these characters overlap, but in a good theme way. It's a little coincidental that all of these people, Dalinar, Shallan, Adolin, all of their families are related in some way. Not like literally, but like metaphorically. Kaladin killed Shallan's brother. Shallan had something to do with something that happened to Kaladin. I don't know why, I forgot. But Dalinar is the reason that Moash is, well, Elhokar, technically Sadeas, technically Rashon is the reason that Moash's parents died, which is causing Kaladin all of his struggle. Rashon got sent to Kaladin's village, which caused Kaladin's brother to be sent to fight against, again, Shallan's brother, and then Kaladin killed Shallan's brother. So there's this whole like interplay going on, but really what it is saying is that all of these people have a lot of the same feelings, but their position makes it easy to blame them for all those things going on. And so there's this scene where Kaladin realizes that Elhokar is Dalinar's version of his brother, of Kaladin's brother. And you can see that click in his head where he's like, I need to protect this man. That was so good. It was so good. And again, it's the way the click happened. It's the way he had that thought at the very end of a chapter, too. He had that thought, and it very much gave that, oh shit, like adrenaline rush to me as the reader. It was like a, oh, this is very tight. You know Moash is about to assassinate the king. You have to like get there and go quickly. And you get there, and the king is so hungover and drunk that it looks like he's dead. And it's like, huh. And someone's dead in the room, so it's also like, oh, they're bleeding. Kaladin's bleeding. All his like sutures and everything from his leg just come undone. Oh god, we skipped so much stuff. All the sutures from his leg come undone, and he's just trying to book it down the hallway, carrying the king, who is so hungover and drunk that he starts to fall over, and they're not really getting anywhere. And Moash comes in his armor, because Kaladin gave the armor, the shard plate, and shard plate to Moash, which was a choice of all choices, but, you know, yeah. So Moash comes in, and there's this scene where Kaladin is just thinking to himself, like, this is my job, this is my duty, I can't explain to you why. And then Syl, who died, did I explain why Syl died? Yeah, Syl died because Kaladin just was having all of this dilemma, right? So Syl, who technically died, but is a Spren, and I personally didn't believe she was dead just because I knew she was a Spren, and I figured Spren can manipulate those lines a bit, which they can, seemingly. Syl was telling the Stormfather, like, send me. Let me have him. Have him say the oaths, and then he will be worthy. And Kaladin says the oaths, and he just has this, like, ding, like I guess you could say holy moment, where just all of it becomes right. He heals. He gets, like, filled with all the stormlight in the hallway. This would have been a great scene to picture in my head. All the stormlight in the hallway just goes out, and he just radiates all kinds of stormlight, and Moash's companion is just like, huh, and starts to book it, and Moash is just like, uh-oh. So great. But then, again, there's more to it. You're excited in that moment, because you think Kaladin succeeded. But then, they say, that wasn't our real job. Our real job was to keep you away from Dalinar, while Seth was trying to go kill Dalinar, way off in the Shire Plains. So again, there's always this interplay. Every time a good thing happened, there was a bad thing to accompany it. So in the case of the duel, if there was a good thing coming in the duel, you know that there was this tradition that he could uphold to get the advantage. You knew that he possibly could have won all the shard plate if it was 2v1. You get to the place, and Adolin, being a little bit dumb and silly, said, whoever you bring. So they brought 4 people. They technically could have brought more. We're just saying if they haven't played. But they brought 4 people against Adolin. But technically it's a disadvantage match, so then they kept adding on. And so Renarin joined in. I was always suspicious of Renarin. I do want to say that. I had a lot of different things going in my head. I didn't put together that he was a truth seeker until when he started seeing the future visions, literally when the storm was being made. So towards the end of the book, I didn't put that together, but Renarin joined. He was kind of just a distraction. Shalon, of all people, helps by sending out Pattern. I think that's awesome. Very subtle. And that scene where Syl goes to fly off to see Pattern. Oh, that was another one of those trains, like, about to collide and a near miss where they're like, there's a spren, but I'm not sure if it was with someone. You're just like, oh, I just want them to meet each other and know. Great moment. But then Kaladin joins in with no shard plate, joins in this fight. And they have the fight and they win. It's a very close thing. But they win, they pull it together, and then Kaladin technically fucks it up by calling out Amaram in front of the crowd and then gets sent to jail. So that entire sequence, that whole sequence is fantastic. Again, there was that step forward, step back, and there's that oh shit moment of like, oh no, Kaladin. And it's not necessarily the fact that he's going to jail, though there is that scene where they talk about executing him. But it is the fact that you know that Kaladin is not going to respond well to it, which is exactly what happened. So, again, on point, all great. So we skipped the initial sequence, which is very important. I'm just going to mark a bunch of these down just so I don't cover them again real quick. We talked about Shalon killing her dad. We talked about the Chasm Fiend, how they killed the Chasm Fiend, how they like climbed up and everything. Fantastic. Whole Chasm Fiend sequence, fantastic. Whole duel sequence, fantastic. Whole I need to save Elokar sequence, fantastic. Every wit scene, fantastic, obviously. The moment where Kaladin realizes he doesn't have Syl's power anymore and can't take in Stormlight, also very meaningful. When he tries to fight with the spear inside the Ardent's like training arena, but it's filled with water because they're cleaning the sand, and everything just feels wrong. It felt wrong as a reader. Like just reading Kaladin struggling to fight with the spear just felt wrong. That's part of why I held on to the idea that Syl was still alive, because I just could not see Kaladin as a not spear fighter person. I couldn't see him as not Stormblessed. And so I held on to that idea just because of that. And I totally believed that Sanderson would not give it back to him. Like, that's what I meant when I said I trust Sanderson. I fully trust Sanderson to take away that ability and not give it back. But I still clung to the hope because it just felt right. Which is exactly what happened. I will say it did feel a little bit wrong later when as a Radiant, he fights with a bunch of other weapons that aren't a spear. I get why, but also he should have a spear. I think he should be spearman, in my opinion. But anyway, there's all that. All fantastic. So, swearing the oaths, obviously fantastic. And then, like, how he flew across and began fighting Seth, because Seth was trying to kill Dalinar for the second time. We'll talk about the first after we talk about the second, because we're really fucking up this order very badly. But the second time, fully, entirely scared that Adolin was going to die or Dalinar was going to die. There were some very close calls in there. Some of the Bridgemen died too, but there were some very close calls. I really thought Dalinar may die. Dalinar started flying into the sky, and I was like, oh, there's a slight chance. There's a slight chance. And Kaladin comes in, saving Dalinar, and says, the skies are mine. And Seth is just like, fuck. Like, Seth just has that moment of like, oh no, truthless, and he's having pretty much an identity crisis. I feel a little bit bad for Seth, just a little bit. He has a wild point of view in this series, which is why I very much like his character. His point of view is very mixed-mashed. English is complicated, but comes in and they have this very intense fight where they're going back and forth. Seth again wants to die because he's realizing all these things, the desolation is coming, and he just doesn't want to be a part of the world that has that. He doesn't want to believe that that's going to be what's happening. So he kind of gives up. Turns out in the pretty much epilogue, that's not the epilogue, he faced one of his gods of his culture and may be back. Very interesting interaction. I didn't know what to take away from it. But pretty much, like, that whole sequence, again, fantastic, obviously. They're trying to keep the Parshendi from singing. They sang enough, pretty much, to cause a lot of problems, but they still, like, didn't completely wipe out Dalinar's force, which is great. But then Seth appeared, messed with all that. The fight was very intense. I still thought Dalinar was going to die. Even after Kaladin was, like, distracting him, Seth went down to kill Dalinar, and Kaladin was trying to catch up. And then when they got down there, the army was gone, and I was just like, yes! Yes! Oh, it's a close one. It's a close one. So, again, whole sequence fantastic. The first sequence where Seth arrives, also fantastic. It's their first time... It's the first time all the characters ran into those abilities, ran into the abilities of being able to send someone on a wall, being able to bounce off all the walls, heal themselves, all those things. And so that whole sequence was so intense because I really thought things were going to go wrong. And then what it turns out, Kaladin pretty much gets him at the right moment. The right sequence of things happens for Kaladin, with his abilities using just enough Stormlight and whatnot. And as they're falling, Seth realizes that Kaladin has the abilities but doesn't know how to use them yet. And that scares Seth. And you think Seth is going to stop doing the assassinations. He gets back. There's an interlude where it's the point of view of one of the people who hired him. And the guy is like, you're going to go kill Dalinar. And Seth says, yes. And you're like, no! You were so close, man. You were so close to giving up this profession. So, also a great sequence. Kaladin gets his arm cut by a shard blade, and it heals back. That was also crazy. Like, the devastation I had when he lost his arm, and then I was like, okay, maybe he could learn to fight a spear one-armed. He probably won't, but he could. And then he feels sensation in his arm again with the Stormlight. I was like, oh... Stormlight can heal shard blades. There is the reveal later. This is a complete aside, but there is that reveal later where we find out that shard blades are dead Spren, and that's why there's the screaming. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. That's just another one of those things where it's the world building, the magic, the way Sanderson does it. You know there's a reason for things, but it's very hard to predict it until he tells you. So that's one of those examples of something that I would not have been able to understand why there was the screaming. I just knew, okay, this is significant, this is important, it probably has something to do with the history. And then, I think it was Syl who explained, it might have been Pattern. One of them explained that the shard blades are dead Spren. And then Pattern, after Kaladin lost Syl, Pattern says that the humans always kill the Spren, supposedly. And that's why the Stormfather is very upset. He's like, why'd you kill my Spren? So you're devastated about Syl, but then Pattern says that it's meant to happen, and you're just like, oh, very interesting, very weird. Also love Pattern. I haven't said that yet. I just gotta say I love Pattern. I love Pattern. I love the idea that Pattern recognizes patterns. That whole idea, fantastic. Oh, we talked about that. We kind of talked about the duel. Okay, that's most everything. So we still have the ending. We still have the ending sequence. So very last few chapters, they make it to the hidden city. I don't know how to pronounce it, so we're just gonna say the hidden city. With the teleporter, which required one of the Radiants, and it turns out that Shallan is a Radiant, Kaladin is a Radiant, so they could get in. Sadeas got in somehow. That's the first concern. Sadeas got in. Don't know how he got in. The way that this was so just in the back of the mind, it was so just fast and subtle, is very concerning. But Adolin is exploring the city, comes across Sadeas, kills Sadeas, Oathbringer the sword, I'm pretty sure it's Oathbringer, the sword falls to the ground, and Kaladin tosses it out a window. And that's it. All of that happened in the span of a page, pretty much. And then it just went on to the next thing. And it feels so insignificant in that creepy way. It's that scary kind of like, I think something important just happened, but it wasn't played as important. It was very much downplayed. That is very intimidating, very scary. So I want to reread it just to make sure I'm not insane, but I think that is what happened. Sadeas, first of all, was in the city. The question is, how did Sadeas get in the city? The Ghostbloods are in the city, so the question also is, how did the Ghostbloods get in the city? I don't think Sadeas and the Ghostbloods are necessarily hand in hand, because the Ghostbloods were trying to kill Amaran. So there were a lot of double cross plays going on there. But the Ghostbloods were in, recognized Shallan. That was scary as hell, but they still want to hire her, so very interesting. Dalinar goes up to the roof, becomes a Radiant just by demanding the Stormfather to make him one. Work. I love that man. I really do. Adolin kills Sadeas just flat out and then says, like, I'm not the good man that Dalinar thinks I am, which is intimidating and scary. Not that he did it. I mean, honestly, I'm not going to take sides in that regard. But it's concerning that he said it that way. That's what I'm worried about. So all of that happened. Yazda fucking came back to life, and Wit was there to be like, so, let's journey together. And I'm like, yes! Yes! So many things happened. Seth has the meeting with his god. Just so much happened in the last sequence. We find out Renarin says that he's a truth seeker, and that's why he couldn't hold the thing. I still don't know if he doesn't even have the glasses anymore because his eyes healed. So I guess he doesn't have any epilepsy or any of those things. But it's also very interesting. There was that kind of play earlier on where Kaladin knew a lot about epilepsy and other medical things, and Renarin was like, why do you know so much? And Adolin, when Adolin finally saw he was a Radiant, he was like, ha! I knew it! Shallan similarly was like, I knew it. So, finally they all figured out about each other. It wasn't in that accidental way, which I was anticipating most of the book, but I am still entirely content with how all of them found out. And I still, even though it's not necessarily cliche, but the idea of it's cliche, even though it's a little cliche to have, like, all of them all reveal in a circle in the same room at the exact moment and, like, meet together and be like, well, guess we're the 4 divisions. It's still very satisfying. Just the idea of the 4 of them, like, Dalinar comes down and he says, I'm now one of these, and then they all admit what they are. It just hits right. It feels right. I think that's the thing about true fantasy, is that some things just feel right. It's not even necessarily like a prophecy thing, though a lot of prophecy stories are what have these effects. But it just feels good. It feels like proper fantasy. There's no such thing as proper fantasy. I want to set that record there. It feels good. It gives me Lord of the Ring feelings. I'm not comparing these two, for the record, but the feelings I get with Lord of the Rings, even with some of its mistakes, everyone has to admit all big series kind of have mistakes, it gives those feelings to me, and that's probably why I love it so much. My throat's dying a little. I actually can't see how long this video has been because my screen is a little broken, so oh well. But those are just some of the many, many, many things that happened in these books. Yeah. Yeah. Adolin and Shallan's dates. This is one last thing. I usually hate romance plots. I'm trying to think of one I like. Like, one that I liked throughout. That's the caveat. Like, there are ones where I can be convinced. Mistborn. But there's other ones where I'm like, I'm just not a fan of romance plots. I guess you could say maybe Tavi in Codex Alera. But yeah, I'm generally not a fan of romance plots, but I do like Shallan and Adolin in this story. It's done in a good way. The way their dates, the whole idea of the date is to, like, subvert the expectations of dates. I very much appreciate that. I love all like the secrecy and hiddenness between it. I love Kaladin's suspicion during the dates. And then kind of the idea where both of them are just like, oh, this is actually going to cause me to think about who I am and how I can affect that. That's also very nice. So pretty much I actually liked all of their dates, which is a new for me. I don't think I've ever had that happen in a book where I wasn't critical of something to do with the start of a relationship. So that's mostly a me thing. I have a very particular point of view on relationship stuff, which I've not really covered or talked about a lot, but I do. But I am a fan. What makes me very worried is that I have a feeling that that's gonna go wrong now, because that feels like a device that Sanderson's gonna play with. So now I'm a little scared for my future reading and mental health. But very, very interesting. Also, I feel like, just for the record, just to close this out, Yasna has to be Ace. Like, it's just in my head, she's Ace. And I'm just gonna read the series as if she is. So, I'm just saying that. It feels right to me. And we get so little Ace representation that I'm gonna find it where I can get it. So, even if Sanderson makes it happen, I'm just gonna pretend. By the way, you can be Ace and still do things, for the record. But I'm gonna pretend. Okay. That was a lot of things. So now we get into what's next. I wonder what book could possibly be next. No one could ever guess what book could possibly be next in what's new and what's next. Oathbringer. I am scared. This would be the largest book I've ever read by probably a bit. I mean, this book is 50,000 more words than this book. 50,000. The first fantasy book I ever read was 80,000. That puts it into perspective a bit. That is intimidating. So, this book is chunky. It looks chunky. It just looks chunky, particularly part 2. Part 2 is huge. It's scary. It's scary. But I am entirely excited. I love the front with Patrick Ruthus. He says, Rothfuss? I actually know how to say his name. He says, I love this book. What else is there to say? That feels exactly right. That feels exactly correct. There's the highly recommended from Robin Hobb. And then, oh, there's a bookmark in here. Oh, Book Depository. All hail. Book Depository died. This is just a side comment. Book Depository died. It was the company I bought all my UK editions from. I actually had some respect for this company. They died due to a lot of different reasons. So there's no more UK editions free shipping worldwide anymore. That's kind of what these people did. Which is really unfortunate. I found another website that has UK editions. First of all, it's questionable whether or not they're used. And at this point, I already have these really nice ones, and I don't really want to mix used with the nice ones. I appreciate used books, don't get me wrong, but I usually store them separately from these ones where I spent money, or my family, usually my family, spent a lot of money on them, because I want to respect that my family bought me these nice books. But it doesn't have free shipping, and it's possibly used, and so I am struggling to find the UK editions I need, and I need to get Rhythm of War soon, so I really need to work this week for my job and get the money going so I can buy the books I need. But still need Rhythm of War, still need Lost Metal. We haven't read Lost Metal yet just because I was going to save it for the year thing and didn't, which we'll talk about that in a minute. But Lost Metal, and then what book am I missing still? Elantris. I'm still missing Elantris, so a lot of things to do. But Oathbringer is the next book in most regards. The caveat there is what I just talked about, the year later review. So I started a tradition, I believe it was last year. It might have been 2 years ago now. I think it was 2 years ago because it was over the summer. Oh, time is flying. Good Lord. Like time is like flying by. So I started a tradition where I start rereading series in particular, not standalones, just because of time, but reread series a year later and then do a review a year later of what I think about them. The deadline is coming up for The Expanse in that regard. The problem is I forgot to grab The Expanse paperbacks I have while I was home over winter break. And I checked my library today, and pretty much all of the ebooks and audiobooks for all the first 6 books were all rented out for at least a month. So that's not happening. I can reread the later books and comment on the later books for sure. I can comment about all my memories of The Expanse, which are fantastic because I love all of it. I can watch the show and talk about the show. I actually have watched the show, by the way, since I last read it. So I can talk about the play between the show and the book. But I don't have the time or the physical ability currently to reread all of The Expanse. So I'm a little torn on whether I should just do a year and a month or something like that, or if I should actually just reread what I can and then just talk about what I remember. So I kind of fucked up that timing a little bit. And again, I kind of messed it up with Mistborn Era 2, but technically because it is an ongoing series, I think that's fair. I think it's best to do the year in review thing for not ongoing series. And I think that this series, Stormlight Archive, is going to be ongoing for a while. I think there were some conversations in 2020. 2020 was the year for books, man. Like, everything else sucked, but 2020 had some damn good book announcements, I have to admit. There was some conversation in 2020 about how long the Stormlight Archive will be. And if I remember, it was decently long. It's not, like, going to be Dresden Files long, but it will be long. So I might hold off on those kinds of things. But don't get me wrong, I probably will reread all of these books by the time the next book comes out. If I time this right, the 5th book of Stormlight Archive is on its 3rd draft right now and will probably be done within 6 months of this week. And so if I happen to take a long time with Oathbringer and Rhythm of War, the 5th book could come out. So we could do it all in one go. So it's possible. I'm not purposefully going to slow down. It's very hard to slow down with Sanderson anyway. But if there happens to be a pause, it could work out in our favor. So what I'm going to do, and I did this in Way of Kings, and it actually kind of worked out, even though, again, it put that pause. I might do that thing again where I read a book in the middle of the book. Again, it's hard because I forget most of the beginning of the book when I do that. That's what happened with Way of Kings. That's what happened with Words of Radiance. I read The Left Hand of Darkness in the middle of Words of Radiance. But I think it's a good method, and it gives me the chance to read other books and not just be stuck in Stormlight. So, in that regard, I think the book I'm going to read, I'm a little torn, but I think the book I'm going to read is this one. I don't know, The Thousand Names. No, 1,000 Names is going to be too similar to Stormlight. I think it's going to be this one. Now, Here's why this is very funny. This would technically be the second romance book I ever read. Um, for the record, just so it's out there for those who don't know me, I am not a romance reader. As I talked about in spoilers, I don't do romance well. And it's mostly because of my point of view of life and my point of view on romance and those things, which is a very complicated point of view, and I can't even begin to elaborate on it right now. But I have a different view. We'll just leave it to that. So, in the past, I've struggled with these things. The previous romance I read was for school. It was the Guernsey Potato Peel Pie Society. And while some of the formatting stuff was interesting, I have to admit, the ending was so rushed, it kind of disturbed me. There's definitely way worse out there, but I was just like, yeah, this is kind of what I expect. One of my friends, we'll say friend, has read this book, and every time I've seen this book, I've thought to myself, that cover looks gay. And every time I Google it, and it is, and I'm just like, well, I've never read an LGBT romance book before, and I feel like I should. On some level, I feel I should at least try one. And I decided this is the one to try because there's a sequel if it is good. It's a little concerning reading the plot on the back. I did read the back. This is one of the few cases where I will read the back just because I'm not sure if I'll like it. But again, some of it sounds concerning, some of it sounds interesting. It sounds like the kind of book though that is full of dramatic irony, where you know something about another character and you know something about the other character, and that knowledge just keeps flying by each other, as I talked about, non-spoilers. This feels like a book that does that, and so I'm going into it looking for that. And another very interesting thing I've seen about this book on Goodreads and all kinds of places is that everyone argues about the genre. All the romance readers say it's too sci-fi, and all the sci-fi people say it's too romance. And so I'm very interested to see if it is actually balanced, or if, in my point of view as well, it feels skewed one way or another. It's more likely I'll be on the sci-fi side that says it's too romancy, but also I'm coming into it assuming it is a romance, so it'll be very interesting. So that's why I want to do this book. It's also very short, too. Look at this font size. It's huge. Look at the font size of fucking Brando Sando. Okay, it's probably hard to tell the difference. It's different. Let's just say that. So, I think this might be the book I read. But, as you can tell from me talking about it, I have mixed feelings. I'm just not sure if I will like it. I'm also a little scared of liking it, because then I would have liked a romance book. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've just never predicted that would happen. So, weird feelings. There's also the chance of reading A Master of Jinn, which I have wanted to read for a while now, ever since I picked up the book. I do know nothing about this book. I just know the cover, and I know it sounds badass. When I say sounds badass, I mean it looks steampunky and fantasy. So, very, very interested in this as well. I have a lot of other books here too. I've been meaning to reread Dracula, so I have Dracula here. I could read the 5th season. I probably won't. We have Dune. I still don't want to commit to Dune while I'm in Stormlight Archive. It just seems like a lot going on. I realize Dune probably isn't as bad as people told me when I was younger, but I still want to isolate it just so I can fully appreciate it. So I want to do something that's a little bit... I want to do a book that's different than Stormlight as my break. So that's why I am looking possibly towards this, because it is different for sure. And I could do like a mystery book, but yeah, I'm not really feeling mystery. I can't explain why. I'm just kind of not feeling mystery. I could definitely go for some historical fiction right now. Historical fiction and sci-fi. But not mystery. And I don't feel like I'm ready to start Red Rising or 5th season. Those are both series. I technically started a lot of series and not read the second book this year because technically that applies to Ender's Game, or last year, I guess. Ender's Game and a lot of the other sci-fi books I read as standalones, most of them have sequels. So I need to reflect on that after this video. But this might be the plan. We'll see. But first I gotta figure out what the deal is with the Expanse. I'll probably start Oathbringer and figure it out as I go. With all that said, I apologize for how long this video is. I can't see how long it is, but I assume it is long. This book was absolutely fantastic. It was both everything I hoped for and not what I expected. And I am very excited for the day that I reread it because I'm sure it's like all the hints will come out because I know there's hints everywhere. So, again, with all that said, I hope y'all have a good one, and I'll see y'all whenever I see y'all. Don't know when that will be. My voice is dying. All right. Bye-bye. Have a good one.